Today I'm going to be looking at the differences between Lee stoppers and Proglass filters. As a seascape photographer, being able to control my shutter speed is really important because the sea's always moving. And I've long been using the little stopper and big stopper made by Lee filters, which allow me to create long exposures. But I'm getting a lot of questions on my workshops now from clients asking me, which filter do I buy? Because Lee filters have now brought out these, the Proglass IRND range. There's 6 of them, from 2 stops to 15 stops. But what's new is the 6, 10 and 15 stops in that range. And so they seem to be doing the same job as our old friends, the little stopper and the big stopper and the super stopper. But actually they are subtly different. I've now taken them out of their packaging, and as you can see, they look pretty well identical, but they're not. So over here I've got the original little stopper. And this actually, the dye goes right the way through the glass. And there's also a slight blue tint. This was introduced when these were originally made to deal with infrared pollution, and that blue is something we've come to know and love. And over here we have the IRND one, the new one. That stands for infrared neutral density, and the coating is applied, so it's a coating rather than right the way through the filter. It doesn't have that colour cast, and there are other subtle differences that we'll explore later. So I'm now going to take these 2 down onto the beach and put them through their paces, and let's see what happens. So for this first photograph, I'm really attracted to the cliffs and their beautiful reflections in the sand. So I'm going to use a polarizer, even though there isn't much sunlight, because it'll just boost those reflections a little bit. And then I'm also going to use a 0.6 hard grad at a slight diagonal down to the top of the cliffs, just to balance up the sky and, more importantly, bring out the foreground. And with those filters, I've ended up with a base exposure of 1/3 of a second at f11 and ISO 100. So now I'm going to put on a little stopper. That's 6 stops. And that's going to give me an exposure of 20 seconds. And the reason I'm doing that is because I like the simplicity of this scene. Just the reflection of the cliffs is all very gentle and ethereal. So if I blur the clouds and streak them a bit, but not too much, that'll just add to that atmosphere. So that's the shot, and it's done what I wanted. It's just streaked the clouds nicely, added some simplicity to the scene. And as you can see, it's ever so slightly blue. I'm shooting on daylight white balance. In fact, I found that auto white balance tends to deal with the blue colour cast if it's a concern for you. And also shooting at wide angles, this is at 20mm, you can see a subtle vignette, again another typical feature of this filter. So now I'm going to swap my little stopper for a Proglass equivalent, still 6 stops, and I've popped that in and made another photograph, same camera settings. And as you can see now, we don't have the blue colour cast. We've still got the lovely simple streaking from 20 seconds, and we don't have the vignette. So they are subtly different looks, but I think using this daylight white balance, you can see quite clearly a difference between the two. Which you like is going to be a matter of personal taste, really. You may prefer the in-camera vignette, and yes, you can add it in Lightroom afterwards, but how much more fun to see it while you're out making your pictures in camera. But you may prefer the picture without the vignette, and I think if pushed to choose on this occasion, that would be my choice. I've headed a bit further down the coast now, and I've arrived at this location where the conditions are very different. We've gone from serenity to turbulence. Now I've popped the polarizer and the 0.6 hard grad on again, but I'm going with a 30th of a second here, just to try and capture some of the texture in these interesting waves rushing around these bits of metal sticking up. I'm now adding the stopper, and that's allowing me to have a 30-second exposure. Quite a different look. It smoothed out the texture in the waves, and now we can see a lot more of those sticks that were obscured in the earlier picture. And there's a sort of ghostly, ethereal feel to this image. Now let's try the Proglass equivalent. And you can see that the shutter speed has had to change, because even in the time I was swapping filters, the sun's peeped through a little bit more, and so this is 25 seconds rather than 30 seconds. It's not a big difference. We still have the same ethereal look. We can still see the sticks quite clearly. If we compare the two pictures, again you can see that the stopper has a slight blue colour cast, which you don't see with the Proglass. And you can also see a gentle vignette, and the Proglass doesn't have one. In this case, I'm seeing this picture as black and white in my head, so really the colour doesn't matter at all. And actually, I might quite like the vignette as well. The light's fading now, and I'm just going to catch my last picture of the day. I'm just attracted to the water that's washed up on the quay here, creating some reflections from the railings, and I'm using a little stopper here, and it's allowing me to get 30 seconds, which has just smoothed out all the water so that we really notice those reflections. And now I'm swapping over to the Proglass equivalent. Same sort of look, but as before, you'll note that unlike the little stopper, the Proglass equivalent doesn't have that blue tint, and it doesn't have the vignette. And I think I might just decide which one I like best when I get home with this one and look at it in Lightroom. What a fantastic day I've had down at the coast today. The weather's certainly been very kind. And I hope I've shown you that both filters are a really good choice. Maybe you like a little bit of blue, or maybe you're a black and white shooter and you don't care about colour. Maybe you like a vignetting camera. Maybe colour accuracy straight out of camera is more important to you. But in the end, you know, the creative choice is yours.